ceremony. Once I saw the YouTube video, I knew I had to come to Angel Island, and if possible, to bring my 3 children and my elderly father. Fortunately, I already had plans to come to the Bay Area with my family for my niece's wedding to take place a couple of weeks after discovering the video. My sister contacted Peter Ostrowski, a park ranger tour guide. Peter was most helpful in suggesting tour guide schedules and ferry schedules. Because of the wedding reception, there were a lot of us in town. Several were able to find time for the tour. Myself, my 3 children, 2 nephews visiting from Hawaii, my parents, and my sister. When we met Peter in person, he seemed so excited to meet relatives of the women in the photo banner. We told him that in the full photo, there was a woman in the background kind of peeking in at us. We always wondered who she was and why she was in the picture. Peter said he knew who she was, Catherine Maurer, the angel of Angel Island, and would tell us about her if we would tell him about our relatives, as all they knew was their names and their intended destination. We expected a 1-hour tour. Peter showed us every nook and cranny for about 2 hours, which gave us plenty of time for us to tell him the tale of our grandparents. My grandfather, Kyung-Soon Park, a widower, left Korea for Hawaii in 1904, leaving his daughter and son in the care of a relative. He was looking for a better life than he had, a better life for his children. He worked on sugar plantations, but decided to leave Hawaii, in part because of centipedes. I was actually told my grandfather did not want to raise his children where there were centipedes and other dangerous animals. I thought this was an odd explanation until I was older and found out that in non-California centipedes can be quite large and poisonous. Plus, in Korean folktales, the centipede is usually the villain, sort of like the big bad wolf in European folktales. So as soon as he could, my grandfather moved to the mainland, returning to Korea around 1910 to marry my grandmother, a widow with a son. By 1914, he had enough money to send for his family, which now included a 3-year-old whom he had yet to meet, my Auntie Rose. My own father, Johann Park, was born 2 years later in Idaho. 7 children in total were born here in America. They farmed in Idaho and then in Oregon and worked hard to establish themselves. There were occasional hard times, but they thrived. Some of the children stayed in Idaho and Oregon. Some moved to other states. My father followed his sister Rose to California. As I mentioned before, we got a special tour by Peter Ostrowski. It was fabulous. Of course, we spent an inordinate amount of time in the women's quarters taking way too many pictures. Most were of my 95-year-old father posed next to the life-size photo of his mother. My father was just 9 when his mother died of complications for childbirth. I don't know of any photos of him with his mother. This was the next best thing. Peter was very patient, as was the young couple who just happened to take the tour with us. It was an utterly wonderful day. It was incredible to stand in the same buildings my grandmother did when she first arrived in this country. As I stared at her photo, I tried to imagine what she felt. The sadness at leaving her homeland, the excitement and uncertainty of a new life in the country so different from all she knew. A few years ago, we gathered for a family reunion in celebration of our 100th anniversary, a century here in America. Descendants of 7 of my grandfather's 10 children were there. Nearly 100 of us from all over the United States, from all sorts of professions, from all walks of life. We needed to wear name tags and t-shirts color-coded to our generation. In the middle of it, I thought to myself, if my grandparents could just see us now, if they could see what they had started, I'm sure they would be so proud. This memorial wall gives me the opportunity to honor them for having the courage to leave everything that was familiar to them and start anew in a country that was at times less than welcoming. As one of their many descendants, all I can say is that was worth it. Thank you.
And now it's my honor to introduce Ruthie Holland from Chico. She's the grandniece of Catherine Maurer, who Cheryl Ann talked about. Catherine Maurer was known as the Angel of Angel Island, and she helped Angel Island immigrants from 1912 until 1940 when the immigration station closed. Ruthie?
Grant, right there, managing the microphone. I I give you thanks for this wonderful privilege that's mine today. It just all began with a phone call to you, asking about the plaques in the wall today. And it's such an honor to be here today and to represent my great aunt. My mom, who through the years, being the niece, placed many materials here at the Angel Island Association beginning years ago. And then she continued to place materials in the State Library of Sacramento. And then she placed materials in the archives of the Methodist Episcopal Church across the United States. For my great aunt's meager salary was provided through, number one, the United States government, number two, the Daughters of American Revolution, and number three, the Methodist Episcopal Church. But I did want to begin by saying also that my mom, when she was 87, it appeared that we were losing her. And family gathered in Chico at the hospital there. And I was down on my knees looking directly at my mom's little head. And she said, "Take care of my files. They are my testimony to the world." "I will, Mom," I cried. And then again, "Take care of my files. They are my testimony to the world." "Mom, I promise," as the tears flowed more. "Take care of my files. They are my testimony to the world." And it just went on and on. Those were her words only. And so I have her files. And my children who are in the audience, when I'm 87, I will be saying the same thing. Take care of my files. They are my testimony to the world. Well, my great aunt was born in Ontario, Canada, and she herself would become an immigrant to the United States. She was one of 11 children, the youngest. When she was a teenager, she went to a youth convention, and it was at that convention that she felt compelled in her soul by God to become a deaconess. And that was a big thing. And so when she graduated from high school, she entered the United States, and she began attending a church college in Illinois. But during that freshman year, she got word that her mother had died. So she went back to Ontario, Canada, and she continued to stay there until her father died 7 years later. So her dream was postponed that long. And in that year, 1911, she came to the United States again to pursue her dream and what she felt was her calling. And she entered San Francisco here, where there was a national deaconess training school. I doubt that it exists today. But she got her year's training, and she graduated with her diploma. And there was such a need beginning on the island here as immigrants were pouring in. My great aunt would connect with 12,000 to 15,000, history says, through 1 year. And so she began her work here. She was one of the graduates that got placed on the island here for all the needs of the women, but there's stories of men too. And so I always remember being a youth, my great aunt was always in this priestly looking attire, and it was black dress starting at her neck and flowing all the way to the ground. And then she had this black cape that she always wore around her because of the severe weather as she greeted immigrants arriving here on the island. And then the cape was connected with 2 big white bows, and then she had white cuffs. And the head had a black bonnet on it. I don't remember her in a house dress. I don't remember her in pants and top. And I just remember her, even after she retired, I remember her in her black, priestly looking attire. things that my great aunt did on the island here provided for many needs. She probably, for all of your ancestors that have gone ahead of you, she probably was one of the few hopes here on the island. She would buy toothpaste. Oh, I first must say, she would go from the mainland, where she had an apartment in San Francisco, and she would ride a ferry to the island here and begin her day. And then at the end of her long days, filling many needs, then she would go back to, by ferry to the mainland. Next day, she'd do the same thing again, ride on the ferry. Some of the many needs that she did was she would speak to many church groups, no particular denomination, even though, as I said, 1/3 of her salary was provided by the Methodist Episcopal Church. And then the United States government, I think I might be repeating myself here, no, and then the Daughters of American Revolution. So that's how her meager salary was provided for her. Okay, so she would buy toothpaste. There was a famous violinist detained here on the island, and one of his strings of his violin broke. So she made sure she got a replacement for that. She dictated letters. She translated them in English for many of your immigrant loved ones that were held here. She prepared them for court. She taught them English over and over. In fact, at the beginning of her placement here, she asked the United States government for 2 rooms, one for a library and the other for an office. Because during the course of her years on the island here, she would set up patriotic programs so the detainees that were held would learn about the United States in which they were entering. And she would set up Christmas programs, and through women's groups all over that she spoke to on the mainland, she made sure that every detainee had a few gifts given to them every Christmas in grocery carts that would be moved through where the programs were held. I just learned, being up in the immigration building before the program began, that she made certain that sanitary needs were changed for the women as well as the men. She made sure that fire protection was changed on this immigration part of the island. She was a social worker in a way for all of the needs. And I have some little quotes here that I wanted to share with you. I just can find them a second here. There we go. Well, first of all, she was called some different names. She was called the Angel of Angel Island. And as I talked with many of you administrators this morning and docents, it was so incredible to hear that her name is used over and over and over daily and throughout the week as the Angel of Angel Island. She was called Kuan Yin, Goddess of Mercy, Missy Missy Malo, Mama, and it probably could have gone on and on. Now then, as the Japanese war brides, picture brides arrived, she would help them find their husband-to-be. She would assist in court proceedings. One Japanese detainee boy wanted to postpone his hearing because he felt he wasn't ready to pass the verbal tests that he had to go through with the officials. And my great aunt said, now, you need to keep that appointment. If you change it and postpone, that will not be to your favor. You go, you answer the questions, but don't give them any more information than they absolutely ask for. She was so on their side. I could go on and on and on with the research that unfolded as I studied. She would provide clothing through the women's organizations to whom she spoke. She would teach skills, woodworking, sewing, knitting. And then when many of them passed their citizenship test, she would help find employment for them on the mainland. As time went on, there was a fire, as you're probably aware, in the immigration station here, and it destroyed a good bit of it. And that was in 1940. But although information here on the island indicates that that is when her time of service ended, it was not so. She retired after 40 years and 3 months of service because the detainees who had not passed their tests were transferred to San Francisco 801 Silver Avenue, and they were held there. And then the administration offices, the few that there were, those were also transferred to the same address. And from there, she continued her service. In the year 1951, after 40 years and 3 months of service, she continued to serve those who had passed their citizenship. She would keep her apartment open. I remember that apartment so well. She would keep it open to women who needed counsel, comfort, who needed help with their English, needed help with any services at all. One Korean gal that had passed her test said, "Catherine Mallory's apartment is a place of national love." The Chinese, I have just a few more fun little examples. The Chinese women here that were detained, my Aunt Catherine discovered they loved dolls. One day, the little Chinese girl came to my Aunt Catherine with 30 cents. And she says, "Mama, buy doll for Wang Shi. She too muchy heap cry." And so my great aunt made sure that a doll was purchased for Wang Shi, who was crying too much. When my great aunt helped a Russian woman who had been crying all morning because she could not find her husband, my great aunt saw that a parole hearing was set up, and the lady was told, "You find employment here on the mainland, and then you make efforts to find your husband after that." And finally, a great retirement was held for my great aunt. Pictures show that it was held on this island, maybe on the same grass. I don't remember attending that as a young girl. But finally, I close by saying my great aunt was returning one day from serving here on the island, and she was on the ferry, and a visitor was, a passenger of the ferry was sitting next to her and questioned, "Well, just what is it that you do on the island?" So my great aunt described a day in her life on the island, and the lady responded, "Oh, you are the one person who gives love to the detainees." And at the end of each day, my great aunt would look up at Mount Davidson, where stood the cross, and she would say, "The cross, it standeth fast. Hallelujah." The next day, she would say the same thing. I thank you for this privilege, and all the many employees of the park as well for allowing me to stand here today. Thank you.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Betty Diamond Jew Dickard. Betty is from Collier's, Tennessee. She's the daughter of Henry and Edith Jew, who were Angel Island immigrants in 1921 and 1938. Betty?
Grant, and staff, on behalf of Edith and Henry Jew's family, we thank you. My name is Betty Diamond. I am number 5 daughter of 8 siblings. I am delighted to share our parents' journey with you. Gold Mountain charmed in Southern hospitality. Henry Juman Hay and Edith Ganyanyong, both 14-year-old newlyweds, began their devoted marriage, separated for 17 long, lonely years, but resolute to endure hardship together. In 1921, with Angel Island interrogation behind, Henry imbued by 18-hour workdays, determined to keep his 4 promises to his bride: financially support his household in Hoi Ping, repay his paper sponsor, receive rights to a laborer's return certificate for 2 visits. The first, 9th year, then the next one was the 10th year. Each required a $1,000 collateral deposit. The most important promise, to qualify as merchant of a business, the sword it needed to slay discrimination mandated by the Chinese Exclusion Act. Goodfellas Market, established in Clarksdale, Mississippi, 90 miles south of Memphis, Tennessee, came to fruition in 1933 by networking with wholesale suppliers and merchant relatives in the area. Symbolically, business ownership bridged his precious wife, his daughter, and himself over the vast Pacific Ocean in 1938 to the Mississippi Delta. Together, the family embraced America. Fake, Gold Mountain, Game San. Clarksdale was known as the Golden Buckle in the Cotton Belt, home to a multicultural mixture of Lebanese, Italians, Jewish, and Chinese immigrant merchants, along with African American farm laborers and white plantation owners. Harvard University, Dr. James Lowen states, once slavery was abolished, plantation owners closed their company stores. Goodfellas Market? Well, it simply supplied the demand of the neighborhood. Business? Very good. Steady during the weekdays, but on the weekends, they worked hard with the farm laborers. They were cotton choppers, cotton pickers as they were called, came in droves by the truckload to downtown Clarksdale, packed shoulder to shoulder, streets a-buzzing, buying, jigging as the blues music blared from the juke joints up and down Issaquena and forth. Mom and Dad intuitively seemed to know how to negotiate, naturally how to make people feel welcome, holding their items until they headed home. Business was a-booming. Known for their compassionate, charitable hearts, our parents extended grocery credits, even 100-pound sacks of feed to farmers during the slow-growing season.